once vowed to defend our nation with honor, but now they sit behind bars, condemned to die. These are the forgotten shadows of military justice. Soldiers once trusted with the nation's safety, now accused of some of the most haunting crimes in U.S. military history. Welcome to this chilling true crime documentary, where we dive deep into the lives of the most dangerous inmates currently awaiting execution under the U.S. military justice system. Since 1916, the United States Armed Forces have executed over 130 individuals. Yet in the last half-century, not a single military execution has taken place. Why have these cases stalled? What monstrous acts brought these men to the brink of death? Each case is a tangled web of overturned convictions, shocking DNA revelations, grisly on-base massacres, and complex courtroom battles between military and civilian jurisdictions. Strap in. This is not just a documentary. This is a descent into the darkest corners of military crime. These are the men the U.S. government has marked for death. Number 1, Timothy B. Hennis. Our journey begins in Fayetteville, North Carolina, May 1985, just days before Mother's Day. Air Force Captain Gary Eastburn was away in Alabama, immersed in specialized training for an overseas deployment to England. Back home, his wife Catherine remained at their house near Fort Bragg with their 3 young daughters, 5-year-old Cara, 3-year-old Erin, and 22-month-old Jana. If you love your mother, then like this video and comment by typing, "I love you, mother." They were an ordinary military family preparing for a fresh chapter abroad. In that process, the Eastburns decided to find a new home for their beloved English setter, Dixie. They placed an ad in the local classifieds, hoping to find someone kind-hearted enough to adopt their cherished dog. That someone was 27-year-old Army Sergeant Timothy Hennis, stationed at Fort Bragg. On May 7th, Hennis arrived at the Eastburn residence to meet Dixie. He came across as polite, respectful, and genuinely thankful. Catherine handed over the dog, believing she was doing the right thing. But what she didn't know was that this brief exchange would set in motion one of the most horrifying crimes in modern military memory. Just 4 days later, the Eastburn home fell silent. Phone calls from Captain Eastburn went unanswered. Friends and neighbors began to worry. Newspapers collected on the porch, and an eerie sound of a crying baby echoed from inside. In a close-knit military community, silence like this was deafening. On May 12th, officers arrived, and what they found was a nightmare. Catherine had been brutally raped and stabbed to death. Little Cara and Erin were murdered in their bedrooms, stabbed repeatedly. Only baby Jana was found alive in her crib, severely dehydrated, but somehow untouched by the chaos around her. The scene was gruesome and surreal. Investigators meticulously combed the home, photographing every detail, gathering fingerprints, searching for hair fibers and traces of DNA. They found evidence of disturbance, as if the killer tried to clean up or stage the scene. But the clues left behind told a story. A single attacker, sloppy yet brutal. Neighbors recalled seeing a tall man wearing a members-only style jacket, leaving the Eastburn home, carrying a trash bag, as if hiding the aftermath of a massacre. One critical clue would come from the family's dog. The trail leading to Army Sergeant Timothy Hennis began with an unexpected but undeniable link. The family dog, Dixie, the Eastburn's English setter, had recently been adopted by none other than Hennis himself. This connection placed him squarely in the orbit of Catherine Eastburn and her 3 young daughters, just days before their brutal murders. Police wasted no time. A composite sketch, eyewitness descriptions, and the fact that Hennis had visited the home just before the crime painted a chilling picture. Investigators closed in. He was arrested and charged with the murders of Catherine, 5-year-old Cara, and 3-year-old Erin Eastburn. In 1986, the case went to trial. Prosecutors laid out their argument with surgical precision. Hennis had motive, means, and opportunity. Neighbors identified him from a photo lineup. The timeline aligned too perfectly. Though the case was largely circumstantial, it was compelling. Hennis insisted he was innocent, but the jury wasn't convinced. He was found guilty on all counts, 3 charges of first-degree murder, and sentenced to death. Hennis was transferred to North Carolina's Central Prison, where he joined the state's most notorious death row inmates. But this was far from the end. In 1989, his defense team won a major victory. The North Carolina Supreme Court overturned his conviction, citing prejudicial errors, problems like improper evidence handling, and potential jury bias. At his retrial, without solid physical evidence tying him directly to the crime scene, the jury reached a stunning conclusion: not guilty. Hennis walked free. He didn't just fade into the background. He re-enlisted in the U.S. Army, rising through the ranks to become a staff sergeant. He retired honorably in 2004. To many, his story symbolized a man who had been wrongfully accused, a soldier whose name had finally been cleared. But the ghosts of the Eastburn murders never rested. By 2006, DNA technology had evolved dramatically. Across the country, cold case units were breathing new life into old files. One of those files was the Eastburn case. Investigators retested biological evidence taken from Catherine's body, evidence that had degraded over time, but could now be analyzed using cutting-edge forensic tools. The results were shocking. The DNA matched Timothy Hennis. Now the legal system faced a chilling question. Could a man acquitted in civilian court be tried again for the same crime? Under normal circumstances, no. The principle of double jeopardy protects citizens from being retried after an acquittal. But Hennis wasn't just any citizen. He was a retired soldier, and the military plays by a different rule book. Under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ, military courts can assert jurisdiction over service members, even retirees, if they are recalled to active duty. And that's exactly what happened. In 2010, the Army summoned Hennis back to face a court-martial at Fort Bragg. This time, the prosecution had a powerful weapon: the DNA. The defense fired back, claiming the evidence had been contaminated or mishandled. But a jury composed entirely of military personnel didn't buy it. The science was damning. The evidence was clear. Timothy Hennis was convicted once again, this time by the very institution he once served, and sentenced to death. Timothy Hennis was once again found guilty, 3 counts of premeditated murder. On April 15th, 2010, he was sentenced to death, this time not by a civilian court, but by the U.S. military itself. Today, he remains confined to a high-security cell at the U.S. Disciplinary Barracks in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, America's only military death row. Nearly 15 years have passed since his second death sentence. In total, Hennis has spent close to 2 decades behind bars. Despite multiple appeals, motions, and legal challenges, his fate hangs in limbo. He is one of the rare few, a U.S. soldier still waiting for the military's ultimate judgment. Number 2, Hassan Karim Akbar. Betrayal in the ranks now. We fast forward to March 23rd, 2003. The United States had just launched its invasion of Iraq. Operation Iraqi Freedom was underway. At Camp Pennsylvania in Kuwait, the 101st Airborne Division, one of the Army's most elite units, was preparing to move into hostile territory. Tension rippled through the camp. Sleep was thin. Nerves were frayed. Soldiers ran drills and checked equipment, fully aware they were days away from war. But no one expected the first threat to come from within their own ranks. Sergeant Hassan Karim Akbar had been under watch for disciplinary issues. Fellow soldiers described him as distant, isolated and filled with resentment. Some suspected he struggled with mental health issues. Others thought he simply couldn't be trusted. Whatever demons Akbar battled, they erupted in one of the most chilling acts of fratricide in modern military history. Before dawn, under cover of darkness, Akbar allegedly sabotaged the camp's generator, plunging the sleeping quarters into a sudden, eerie blackout. The soldiers inside were completely unaware that one of their own was about to attack. Then, the nightmare began. Akbar hurled 4 hand grenades into 3 tents, the explosions tearing through nylon, flesh, and bone. Chaos erupted as flames and shrapnel shredded the darkness. Screams filled the air, some of pain, others of panic. Soldiers scrambled for cover in their underwear, barely awake, desperate to survive. But Akbar wasn't finished. With an automatic rifle in hand, he opened fire on his fellow troops, men who had trained beside him, broken bread with him, trusted him. When the chaos subsided, 2 officers were dead: Army Captain Christopher S. Seifert and Air Force Major Gregory L. Stone. 14 others lay wounded, some clinging to life, all changed forever. Akbar didn't make it far. His rampage was cut short when fellow soldiers overpowered and detained him, preventing even more bloodshed. The aftermath uncovered disturbing truths. A search of Akbar's belongings led to a chilling discovery: a diary. In a February 4th, 2003 entry, just weeks before the attack, Akbar vented seething anger at his superiors and expressed clear intent to harm his fellow soldiers. This was no impulsive outburst. It was premeditated, calculated, a betrayal etched in ink long before the blood was spilled. Despite defense claims of insanity, the evidence against Hassan Karim Akbar painted a far darker picture. Some news outlets reported that Akbar had clashed with senior officers who allegedly threatened to bar him from advancing into Iraq with the rest of his unit. Others hinted at feelings of isolation, resentment, and perceived discrimination. But the contents of his personal diary told a much more disturbing story: a chilling, deliberate plan to kill. In April 2005, Akbar stood trial before a general court-martial. The prosecution wasted no time branding him a cold-blooded traitor, a soldier who had turned his weapon not on the enemy, but on his own brothers in arms, just as they prepared to step onto the battlefield. The defense countered with a narrative of mental deterioration. They argued that Akbar's actions stemmed from a toxic mix of paranoia, emotional instability, and extreme sleep deprivation. Stress, they claimed, had fractured his psyche. He wasn't fully in control, but the jury wasn't convinced. On April 21st, 2005, Akbar was found guilty of premeditated murder and attempted premeditated murder. The panel handed down the ultimate punishment: death. Military death sentences aren't final until the president, the commander-in-chief, approves them. And so began a long series of automatic appeals. Akbar's legal team fought relentlessly, challenging the validity of the trial and citing constitutional and procedural flaws. But on October 3rd, 2016, the appeals process officially ended. Every challenge had been denied. Now his fate sits on a single desk, awaiting a signature that may never come. No U.S. military execution has occurred since 1961, but Hassan Akbar remains one of the very few sentenced to receive the harshest penalty the system can impose. His case continues to ignite heated debate about the military's approach to mental health, the psychological toll of war preparation, and the fragile line between insubordination and lethal betrayal.